Imagine a bar of soap resting in your hands. Smooth, pale, and slightly slippery, it carries a faint fragrance that rises as soon as it touches water. As you lather, bubbles form, tiny shimmering globes that drift for a moment before vanishing into the air. For us, soap is so ordinary it almost escapes notice. It waits in bathrooms and kitchens, pressed into neat shapes, liquid in pumps, perfumed or plain. But this ordinary bar hides an extraordinary story. Soap is not simply a tool of hygiene. For millennia it has been medicine, ritual, luxury and survival. Entire cities built their wealth on soap making. Science advanced through the chemistry of its bubbles. Empires taxed it, merchants guarded its recipes, and advertisers tied it to ideas of purity, morality and health. Tonight, we will journey with soap from its first crude mixtures of ash and fat to the elegant scented bars in modern homes. Along the way, we will see how a substance that washes away dirt has always carried with it the marks of culture, economy, and imagination. The earliest origins of soap take us back nearly 5,000 years to the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. On clay tablets left behind by the Babylonians, scribes recorded recipes mixing fats with wood ash and water. The result was a coarse paste, not the smooth bars we know today, but it had one remarkable property: it could clean. Imagine an early Babylonian workshop: clay jars, baskets of ash, animal fats rendered from sheep or goats. A worker stirs the mixture over fire, watching it bubble and thicken. The smell is acrid, heavy with smoke and tallow. What emerges is not pleasant, but it lifts grease from cloth and dirt from skin. In a world of toil and dust, this was something close to magic. The Egyptians too discovered soap-like mixtures. By 1500 BCE, papyrus texts mention ointments of oil and alkaline salts, used not only for cleaning but for treating skin conditions and healing wounds. In their rituals of purification, soap-like substances held a sacred place. To bathe the body before entering temples, to cleanse wounds, to preserve the dead, all demanded mixtures of fat and mineral that foamed faintly when mixed with water. For them, cleanliness was not simply about appearance, it was spiritual. To wash was to prepare the soul for contact with the divine. Soap, in its earliest forms, was tied as much to ritual as to hygiene. Travel eastward, and soap's story unfolds again. In India, texts speak of cleansing with natural plant ashes and oils. In China, mixtures of vegetable matter and minerals served similar roles. The idea was simple yet profound: to combine fat with alkaline substances to make a cleanser. The recipe varied, but the effect was universal. Soap in these early days was not an everyday commodity. It was difficult to make, harsh on the skin, and often reserved for special uses. Most people washed with water alone, or with oils and scrapers, sands, or clays. Soap was more medicine than comfort, more ritual than routine. Still, its potential was there. Those coarse pastes of fat and ash contained within them the seeds of something far greater: the ability to turn washing into an art, a science, and eventually an industry that would change the texture of daily life. When most people think of ancient cleanliness, they imagine the great Roman baths, vast halls of marble, steaming pools, and crowds of citizens relaxing together. Yet the Romans, despite their love of bathing, did not rely on soap the way we do today. Instead, they used oils. Picture a Roman bather. He enters the warm room, pours olive oil over his skin, then scrapes it off with a curved bronze tool called a strigil. The oil carried away dirt and sweat, leaving the skin polished. To the Romans, this was luxury and health combined. Soap, by contrast, was considered crude, a tool of the northern tribes. Writers like Pliny the Elder describe the Gauls and Germans using a mixture of animal fat and ash to make soap. To the Romans, this seemed barbaric. Soap was useful perhaps for cleaning clothing or treating hair, but not something the refined would use on their bodies. In Rome's eyes, soap belonged to the fringes of civilization, and yet ideas travel. As the empire expanded, so too did knowledge of these soap mixtures. Soldiers stationed in the provinces saw local peoples using soap in practical ways. Over time, soap began to slip quietly into Roman life. It was still far from a daily habit, but it gained recognition as more than a curiosity. When the empire declined, the great public baths fell silent. Aqueducts crumbled, cities shrank, and Europe entered what later historians called the Dark Ages. In this world, soap found new ground. Germanic and Celtic peoples, who had long used it, kept the craft alive. By the early Middle Ages, soap was being made in towns and villages across Europe, though often in rough homemade forms. The knowledge was simple: combine animal fat with ash or lye, stir and wait. The result was brown, harsh, and often smelly. Yet it worked. It could clean wool before weaving, scrub hands after work, and even, though rarely, be used to wash the body. Soap had survived the fall of Rome, carried not by emperors and senators, but by ordinary folk and distant tribes. What had once been dismissed as crude would, in time, become a luxury so prized that entire cities would stake their fortunes on it. As Europe moved into the Middle Ages, soap began to transform from a crude village craft into a guarded art. Across the Mediterranean, certain towns rose to fame for producing soaps of exceptional quality. In the Levant, in the ancient city of Aleppo, soap makers perfected a recipe that would echo through centuries. They used olive oil mixed with lye and water, then added laurel oil for fragrance and healing. The mixture was poured into great slabs, cut into blocks, and left to cure for months, hardening into bars of pale green. Aleppo soap became prized across the Islamic world and later in Europe. It was gentle, aromatic, and long-lasting, qualities far removed from the coarse pastes of earlier times. In Spain, under Islamic influence, the tradition took root in Castile. There, soap makers created bars from pure olive oil, known as Castile soap. White, firm, and versatile, it became a symbol of refinement. To own Castile soap was to signal status, wealth, and cleanliness. It travelled in trade across Europe, carried by merchants who guarded its reputation. Farther west, Marseille in France became another centre of excellence. By the 12th century, the city's soap makers were boiling great cauldrons of olive oil and seawater with alkaline ash from the Camargue marshes. The process filled the air with sharp, soapy scents, drifting over the harbour where ships carried the finished bars abroad. Marseille soap grew so important that by the 17th century, King Louis XIV issued strict regulations. Only pure olive oil could be used, no animal fats allowed, and the quality had to remain consistent. To the French crown, soap was not just a commodity, but a matter of national pride. In England, Italy, and beyond, local soap guilds emerged. Recipes were guarded like treasures, passed down within families or guild halls. Soap was still expensive, far from universal. Ordinary villagers might wash with water, sand, or herbs, saving soap for laundry or special occasions. But for nobles, merchants, and the wealthy, a bar of fine soap was a luxury as essential as fine cloth or imported spices. Imagine a medieval soap workshop. Great vats of oil and lye simmering over fire, workers stirring with long paddles, the sharp steam rising into the rafters. Slabs of soap are poured into wooden moulds, hardened, cut, and stacked. Each bar carries with it the weight of labour, trade, and secrecy. By the end of the Middle Ages, soap had grown into more than a household tool. It was a trade, an identity for cities, and a sign of wealth. What had once been dismissed by Rome as crude had become a marker of civilization's refinement. And yet the story of soap was far from over. The next chapters would bring science, industry, and advertising, transforming soap from a guarded luxury into a universal necessity. By the dawn of the modern age, soap was no longer the guarded secret of guilds alone. The rise of science, trade, and industry brought new ways of making it, new meanings attached to it. and new ambitions for those who sold it. Soap was stepping from the workshop into the laboratory, and from the household into the marketplace. In the 17th century, chemists began to look more closely at what soap truly was. They discovered that when fats or oils met alkali, a transformation occurred, a process later called saponification. With this knowledge, soap-making moved from tradition and guesswork toward precision. No longer simply stirred until it looked right. Soap could now be calculated, measured and replicated. The 18th century brought industrial advances that made production faster and cheaper. Great iron cauldrons replaced wooden vats. Steam engines and mechanical stirrers increased output. Soap could be produced in bulk, ready to meet the needs of growing cities where water and cleanliness became ever more important for public health. By the 19th century, soap had taken on a moral and social dimension. Cleanliness was tied to virtue, health, and respectability. Governments encouraged its use to combat disease. Reformers promoted it as a mark of civilization. In Britain, the slogan "Cleanliness is next to godliness" echoed from pulpits and pamphlets alike. Soap was no longer a luxury for the few, but a duty for the many. And then came advertising. Brands like Pear's Soap transformed soap into one of the first true consumer products. Posters showed bright, polished children, happy families, and exotic images linking soap to progress and empire. Pear's Soap famously used engravings of paintings, including depictions of dark-skinned children being cleansed to whiteness, reflecting both the reach and the troubling biases of Victorian marketing. To wash with Pear's was not only to be clean, but to join a narrative of status, morality, and belonging. Across Europe and America, other brands followed. Sunlight Soap, Ivory Soap, Castile Soap packaged for export. Bright wrappers, perfumed scents, and promises of purity turned soap from a necessity into a symbol. Housewives bought it not just to scrub floors or wash linens, but to affirm their place in a modern, respectable world. Behind the glossy advertisements, factories roared. Workers tended great boilers where fats and alkalis mixed, filled moulds with bars, wrapped them in paper, and stacked them in crates. The smell was strong, acrid, yet tinged with fragrance oils. From these factories poured millions of bars that reached every corner of the globe. Soap was no longer rare, no longer a guarded secret. It had become industrial, scientific, and deeply cultural. And as the world entered the 20th century, soap would move beyond its traditional role into forms and functions unimaginable to those early Babylonians stirring fat and ash. Step into a modern bathroom, and soap is everywhere. A bar rests by the sink, perhaps perfumed with lavender or aloe. A bottle of liquid soap sits beside it, foaming with a single pump. In the shower, brightly coloured gels line the shelf. Soap, once rare and guarded, now comes in 100 forms, scents, and styles. Today's soaps are not always the simple blend of fat and lye that our ancestors knew. Many are detergents, created with synthetic ingredients that lather more easily, last longer, and can be tailored to every need. Gentle for babies, antibacterial for hospitals, moisturizing for dry skin. Science has made soap not just universal, but adaptable. Public health has made it essential. In hospitals and clinics, hand washing with soap is one of the most powerful tools for preventing disease. Campaigns across the world remind us that something as small as 20 seconds of lather can save lives. In this sense, soap remains what it has always been, a guardian against the unseen, a shield between health and illness. Yet soap has also become luxury. Walk into a boutique and you'll find bars marbled with colours, shaped like flowers, scented with exotic oils, Himalayan salt scrubs, goat's milk soaps, artisanal blends made in small batches, all sold not only as cleansers but as experiences. What was once coarse ash and fat has become a canvas for beauty, wellness and indulgence. At the same time, soap remains humble. A bar for $1 at a corner store, plain and unscented, does its job as well as any. It cleans, it protects, it serves. Soap is a paradox, common yet special, scientific yet sensual, everyday yet extraordinary, and its story continues. Concerns about the environment inspire new creations, biodegradable soaps, refillable containers, recipes without harsh chemicals. Just as soap adapted to the needs of Babylonians, Egyptians, and Victorians, it adapts to us now. Think again of that bar in your hands. Smooth, simple, and quietly powerful. When you use it, you're part of a chain stretching back 5,000 years, from clay tablets to perfumed boutiques, from the ashes of ancient fires to the bright foam in your sink. Soap today is not just a product, it is history lathered into every bubble. Our journey with soap comes to an end, like the soft bubbles that rise, shimmer for a moment, and quietly disappear. From ash and fat stirred in clay pots, to bars stamped with royal seals, to the perfume soaps of today, this humble substance has always been more than foam. Soap has been medicine and ritual, trade and industry, luxury and necessity. It has carried with it the concerns of health, the pride of nations, and the comfort of the ordinary home. It has been both simple and complex, common and precious, harsh and gentle. As you drift into sleep, imagine the feel of a bar in your hand, smooth, cool, and clean. With every lather, you are part of a story 5,000 years old, one that stretches across temples, baths, workshops, and factories, all the way to your own sink. Tomorrow, when you wash your hands, you will carry with you not just a routine, but a history that has touched countless lives, in countless ways, across countless years. Good night.